Hello, and welcome to Speaking Out on Financial Abuse, stories of survival and hope after financial abuse in romantic partnerships. I'm your host, Lori G., and today we have Terry. Terry is an anonymous survivor of a financially abusive partnership that went on for quite a few years. It resulted in an eviction, and, well, I'll let Terry tell you her story. Terry, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So, where are you in the world now, and where are you from originally?
I currently reside in Port Richey, Florida, Sunshine State. I live in my own home that is an RV, converted RV that I purchased about 4 or 5 years ago.
Cool.
I grew up in a suburb called Amherst, New York. It's a beautiful suburb outside the city of Buffalo. It's about 20 miles away, not far from Canada as well. So,
Are you a Bills fan?
I am not. Although I have been to a few games. Yeah.
That's cool. And
Yeah.
what do you currently do now, and what is your professional background?
I currently work as a personal care aide for people with developmental disabilities, adults mostly, but I have worked with children.
And your degree?
My degree is I have a BSW in social work, which I got in New York through the SUNY school system. I worked with all different kinds of populations, mentally ill, homeless veterans, brain injured individuals over the years. So I've worked with a lot of different, I've worked in nursing homes with the elderly. I started off, my core when I was in college was with mentally ill elderly. I was a single mom raising 2 kids at the time. I really was going to go back to school to be a computer programmer because I do have background in that. However, I just felt it was really socially isolated. Mm-hmm. And I didn't really want to do that for the rest of my life. And I had also, in fact, she's still a good friend of mine today. She was a nurse. We were all single moms living in this brand new income-based apartment complex. And she was going to school and I was going to school to better myself so I could support my kids. And yeah, that's kind of how I got on that journey. I wasn't sure really what I was going to do. So my first experience was kind of like with some single unwed mothers increasing their education at the time.
Well, what was money like in your own household growing up?
Oh, wow. Yeah. I grew up in a middle class kind of family household. My parents provided for us and my dad worked really hard to support 4 kids. Which was, back in the day, that was kind of difficult, but they did it. And they always provided, food, clothing, and shelter for us, the basic stuff, I guess. And my parents would take us out on occasion. And I mean, we weren't really given money for chores per se. It was kind of like expected to do chores when I was a kid.
So you didn't get an allowance?
No, we didn't get allowances back then. I mean, we got money for the tooth fairy and stuff. But anything extra we had to earn, So I got babysitting jobs for extra money, and as I got older, I eventually got a job when I was 15 and held various jobs while still living, at my parents' home until I got married. So
it sounds like your childhood ideas about money, as you grew up, you learned that you had to earn what you had and you had to be responsible for what you had.
Yeah, and you had to, what they taught you was you had to work hard to get it. Mm-hmm. That was pretty much the work ethic that was really taught to me. Nobody was going to give it to you. You had to work to get it and you had to earn it.
How in all that did you meet your ex that we're going to talk about today in your story?
That was a long, long time after. So many, many years later. That was when my kids were grown. They're already living their life, having, their kids. And I decided to move to Florida. I had the opportunity to basically do it. And I had friends that told me to come down and kind of check out the job market down here. And so I did. So I moved down here. I met him on a Meet Me, Meet Me dating app. Yeah.
And what was your first date like?
It was fairly good. He picked me up for dinner and he picked me up on his motorcycle and we went out to dinner. And, at the time, he paid for everything. Paid for my dinner. Yeah. It was, it was a pretty good time. We talked a lot. We were out late. He gave me a ride back home. So that was kind of like our first date.
Well, what attracted you to him? What did you say? Hey, yeah, this could be a good one.
He was kind to me, at first. He showed me, real kindness. He was very considerate. He didn't, we talked a lot prior to that on the dating app, but, he was respectful. He didn't really rush me into anything or push sex or try to, come on to me or anything. It was compassionate and, really understanding.
Did you talk about money at all?
Not then, no. Not in the beginning. We just kind of seemed to hit it off as far as what we all wanted out of a relationship. I thought I had all the boxes checked, and I thought I had talked about just about everything. Everything. I wanted to make sure that I covered all the bases with him. And I guess I didn't. As far as finances, I really guess I just, much later in hindsight, I didn't get into that too much. No.
Well, how long did it take before it got serious? When did it get serious?
It got serious pretty quickly. So after about 4 or 5 months, unfortunately, I lost my job at the time after I'd met him. And, I ended up living with him and moving in with him, just, despite kind of some of my gut feelings about doing that and about living together too soon. So
how long were you living together before you heard that first warning shot financially that this person might have some financial problems?
God, this is hard. I think it was like 5 months in after living with them. I got my income tax return from the government, the incentives they had during COVID-19. And he asked me to borrow it. Also, he was hiding his motorcycle from a repo man because he had not been making the payments. So he asked me for money to make the payments more than one time while living with him.
So you weren't aware he wasn't making the payments on the motorcycle?
No. And one night, he came into the kind of like trailer we were living in. He had all the doors shut and he was like hiding in the bathroom. And he kept telling me to be quiet. I was like, what is going on? Well, little did I know the repo guy was outside looking for the motorcycle. Sick, that was like a huge red flag.
Was that his only mode of transportation, was his motorcycle?
Well,
was it the only way he could work?
Yeah, that's funny you could say that because shortly after I moved in with him, he also lost his job like weeks later. So the two of us had been out of work and I had gotten unemployment. I was just about to get unemployment. In fact, I did. And so he was out of work and he was driving around with a company vehicle, which they took back because it was a company vehicle. So yes, that was his only mode of transportation, which left him with a motorcycle, me with my car, and he often asked me to borrow my car a lot.
Yeah. Well, it rains and snows.
That I was not too comfortable with, even though I lent it to him occasionally to go look for work. Oftentimes I felt like he took advantage of that situation.
Did you give him money for the motorcycle payments?
Yes, but it was in lieu of rent. So in other words, I would give him so much, towards rent, and he asked me to pay the motorcycle payment. So instead of paying, the thing was, it's like, okay, well, you're going to pay the rent and then I'll pay the motorcycle. You got to make a choice.
And he was okay with that?
Yeah. Yeah.
So how did it start hitting the fan? It sounded like you had a sort of a thing going there where
what happened is that I had said no to continuing to pay the motorcycle payment. And the reason I had disagreed to do that was because, and here's the thing, I was paying it off my debit card. So what happened is as he continued, as the payments continued and it was behind, they started calling me because they had my information.
Oh, yeah.
And my fear is they were going to start automatically taking this out of my card. So I told him I wasn't doing it anymore because they were calling my phone wanting to know where the payment was. I said, look, this has nothing to do with me. I just did it as a courtesy.
Yeah.
I said, get rid of my information. I don't want to be a part of this anymore. So that's where it kind of hit the fan because I said, no, I'm not doing this anymore. You're going to have to figure it out, but I'm not. I'll give you the money for rent, but I'm not. And then you can figure out whatever you're going to do. And it started an argument. He got mad, didn't talk to me, was kind of yelling at me. Yeah, it was yelling at me, actually. And that's when I kind of was like, yeah, this is not good.
Time to move.
Yeah.
So you move out, and does he lose the motorcycle?
Well, what happened was yes, I got a job. I got out. I looked for my own place, and I was not going to bring him with me initially. Key point. So I didn't plan on that. So yes, I bought my own place during COVID, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, and this lady actually showed it to me, which I couldn't believe. And it was close to work. Gave me 15 minutes. And she worked out a contract with me so I could pay monthly, which was great. I mean, everything just kind of fell into place. She let me move in within 15 days. And I went back and told him that I was moving and I bought a place.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah.
Did he have a cow?
Which, yeah. And I kind of knew that probably wasn't going to go over real well, but, he knew I was going to move because I told him, I said, I can't continue to live like in this place. It's too small. I can't deal with it. I'm going to go crazy after a while. I mean, it was true, but I embellished it. And I didn't tell him in my brain that I wasn't going to take him with me. So days went by and he finally asked me if he was going to go with me. And I said, well, I don't know. I don't think that's a good idea. I think maybe we should just, you stay here and I go to my own place. And of course, I felt bad for doing that.
Did he have no job and no way of paying his rent at that point?
He actually, by that time, was working. He kind of like handyman kind of guy. He was a cabinet maker, paint, sprayed cabinets and all that. So he was doing all these side jobs to make money in between all this. And so it wasn't consistent, but he was making money that way. He was getting jobs at least. So I let him move in.
Immediately when you moved in or after you had been there in your new home for a bit?
It was after. He moved me in. He moved all my stuff in. He was willing to help me with all that. But it was about a week or so later. And what I didn't know at the time was that he was behind in the rent over where we were. He didn't tell me. I ended up finding that out later.
Was he evicted?
I think if he hadn't moved, we probably would have. And I really thank God, like this all fell into place.
For him?
Well, Yeah, it was a benefit to him, wasn't it?
So he moves in with you, and the super nice guy who, has some issues with finances. So, how did it go? How do things go? And frankly, how long does it go before that starts hitting the financial fan for you?
At first, it wasn't too bad. He was working these little like side jobs and stuff while I was here. And I'm just going to tell this because it's really kind of poignant. So we had been here for a while. He's working on these little side jobs, giving me money for the bills. He's paying, he's contributing what he can. It's not consistent. So I'm still kind of being the person that's like supporting really everything. Well, it's funny because this lady comes to my house, and one day I'm sitting on my porch and she asked me, she's like parked out in front of my place, like staring at me in my porch. And I'm thinking to myself, who is this lady? Well, she comes up to me. She asked me if this is my place. And of course, being guarded, people, they're not going to ask you, if this is your place or who is this person? So I looked at her. I said, who are you? And why do you want to know if it's my place or not? And she was like, are you Terry? And I'm like, why? And she goes, does Jeff live here? That was, I won't get into his last name. Does he live here? And I said, yeah. And she said, did you guys buy this place together? I said, excuse me? Like, why do you want to know? I go, no, it's my house. I bought it. And she said, oh, he told me that you bought the house together. I go, what? I go, who are you? Well, come to find out, it was the lady that he worked for. He was doing these side jobs for, and she was suing him for $6,000.
Oh, no.
Because, and this is what I'm telling you, it's poignant. She was suing him for $6,000 because he and this other guy must have done some work in the house, and he supposedly took $6,000 from her, cashed the check, and she said he never really finished the work. So I'm looking at her now going, you got to be kidding me right now. I go, look, I don't know what you're doing, but this is my house.
Yeah.
If you want to get it, you shouldn't be here. I said, if you want to get an attorney to send him something in the mail, fine. But I don't want any trouble here. And I confronted him about it too. I said, this lady says you owe her $6,000. Oh, well, that's not true. And this and that and the other thing. And she's no. And, he's just denying the whole thing. But still in my head, I'm there's something weird going on here.
Yeah.
So he had been here. He was working those little side jobs or whatever. Like I said, in the beginning, it wasn't bad. He was actually contributing. Then I had sat him down one day and said, look, you got to find something consistent. I can't continue to live with you not having consistent employment. And you got money one week and then you're not going to get paid for this job. And then there's no money coming in. And you have to find something consistent. And he's like, all right, he goes, but I've been looking and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But it took a lot of nagging for me, honestly, for getting him to get a consistent job, and do something consistently. Because it was getting out of the point where he was really not giving me much money at all during the week. He finally did get a job that was consistent as an exterminator. However, he still was, he'd give me money one week to cover a lot of it, not food or toiletries or anything like that, just the basic like lot rent, half of that or whatever. And then, some of the utilities and it was just like a lump sum or whatever, but he never really gave me money for like food or really a lot, for other stuff, which I primarily bought.
Was he hiding money? Was he bringing own money, you think? And he was just BSing you that he didn't have it?
Here's the thing. I don't know what he was doing with his money, and I didn't know. And that's the thing too, because it's not like we ever sat down and did a budget together.
Mm-hmm.
He just was like, just give me the numbers and I'll give you the money. So it's not like, and I had asked, I said, well, let's start doing a budget together. I go, so you can see what's coming in and what's going out and where we need to focus. And So you could see it and I could see it. Nope, refuse that. Completely refused to do it. He was always short for some reason. Like for somebody that was working the hours that he was constantly, which he was working a lot of hours, it's always short. Or, he was going to get a big paycheck, but, you never saw the extra money or anything. I was wondering what happened to it, and I didn't know. And he never really told me. He would just say things like, oh, I got to buy this for the car. I got to buy that for the car. And he was spending money on lunch, I guess, pizza all the time at work. And so I guess I never really questioned it. I thought, well, maybe if you took your lunch, you know what I mean? You have to spend so much money.
Yeah.
So no, I never really knew at the time. I didn't know what he was doing with it all.
Well, what drove you to start pushing to the point where you're going to now try to evict him or tell him he needs to leave your home?
Yeah, well, what started happening is, there was a lot of fights about this all the time. Because, of course, now I'm confronting him all the time about giving me money, and I'm becoming the nag, and I almost felt like a parent, I felt like I was not an equal, partners, there's always guilt, by him that I wasn't a team player, and this other thing. And he never really put money in the house either. But, so like I said, there was a lot of arguments about this. There was a lot of, asking him every week for money because, it was one excuse or the other why I didn't have money. And months had gone by months. It was like months. And he told me, the following week, oh, yeah, I'm going to have it, blah, blah, blah. And I'd get $100 out of him. That's be it. And then next week he didn't have it. So finally I got to, and I've been talking to my friends too about this whole situation too, because I'm like, I can't keep doing this.
Yeah. He's going to destroy you financially.
I said, I can't keep doing this. I can't. So there was, a lot of times where I'd be out with my friends and people are supportive to me and they're like, look, he's try this or try that. And then if that doesn't work, and they were being friends, and we were like, but how much longer can you really, you can't keep doing this. He's using you.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think it was like 6 months had gone by. Yeah, it was like 6 months. Then I suggested we went to a counselor, that we go to a counselor because, this isn't working out and I can't continue to live like this. It's causing fights, pretty brutal fights. And so during this time, I'm telling him, look, if this situation doesn't change, you can't live here anymore. I'm going to give you a notice. You're going to have to leave. I can't, so, and that started more fights. And I started seeing, this counselor individually by myself who started bringing up, prior to that, because I couldn't afford a regular therapist at the time, I was linked up with a therapist with Domestic Violence Coalition here in Florida. So I was getting free counseling through them.
That's great.
Yeah. And I needed it too, because I really thought I was losing my mind over this. I mean, I really did. Yeah. I mean, it was so much stress between, working and, constantly, where's the money going to come from? I don't think I should have to constantly be supporting you or paying for this stuff.
Well, he's like a moving target, these freeloading people, these freeloading guys. I mean, they're just a moving target when it comes to trying to get money towards the mortgage, money to even pay for their own beer. It's like, oh yeah, I'll spot you back, when I have a chance.
Oh, and he was, that's another part of this too, is that he was borrowing money from other people. He was always short and asking me for gas money to get to work. And for a while, I was giving him the gas money. And I said, look, I'm not giving you gas money anymore. You got to figure this out.
Was this his own car or your car?
He had bought, that's the other thing. He had bought a little Subaru, a used one, to get around to some of these side jobs. which he asked me the money for, and I had lent him the money for this with the promise that he was going to pay me back, which he never did.
So you bought him a car?
I basically bought him a car, yeah, and paid for the registration. Yeah, which was like $700 total.
Wow.
So he had that little car, and that's how he was getting around to work. However, there was more chaos. He had gotten involved with this friend who supposedly, he tells me one day, you know, got out of jail. And all of a sudden, it's just, you know, oh, you know, so-and-so, you know, I had to do this with him or that with him. And I lent him so much money. And now so now we're fighting because he's lending people money. And in between all this, I have a domestic violence counselor who's telling me, listen, this is domestic violence.
Pay for that counselor.
Yeah, like and I'm telling her all this stuff because the name calling's happening in between all this while we're fighting. And she said, this is financial abuse. He's financially abusing you. And it really hit me hard. It was kind of like, I'm being financially abused by this guy.
I'm under domestic violence.
Oh my
financial
God,
abuser.
And so anyway, she had kind of educated me a little bit about the eviction process and was starting to guide me into some decision making with that. And that would be one of the options that I could do. And they would assist me with that. They would also assist me in court. So I actually didn't use them, but I did. They were good information as far as how much it would be and where to go and where I could go, do all that. So I did. I had started the eviction process without saying anything to him. And they sent the summons here and he completely ignored the summons. And I said to him, I said, you're going to have to pay the court because you have an official summons. Like, you're going to have to be out. It's going to go default. You have to figure this out. And I think he thought like I wasn't going to follow through on it. Because he kept saying, oh, I'm going to get the money. I'm going to get the money. And I'm like, look, you got to pay the court. You can't pay me anymore. Doesn't really matter. But I didn't. I ended up following through on it. And I think it was a few months later. Yeah. They gave him 24 hours notice that he had to be out. Yeah.
And did he just simply leave?
No. I had a girlfriend here at the time when the eviction happened. And her husband was also here. But no, he escalated the situation in front of the police. He also showed me $1,500 that he had in his pocket.
And how much did he owe you?
It was probably around that. At least. Well, at that point, he owed me at least $4,000.
See, I have the money. Just because
Right.
I'm not giving it to you doesn't mean I don't have the money.
Right. He literally said that in the parking lot. And my girlfriend at the time, because he was like, he was trying to get my focus and tell me all this. And he was kind of up, in my physical space. And my girlfriend was telling him, get out of her physical space or whatever. And then he kind of turned around and yelled at her. And so the situation kind of escalated.
So you get him out and
Yeah.
you get him evicted. You legally go through this whole process, spend hundreds of dollars, get him out. Okay, so when does he come back and how?
What he did was he moved into an RV 2 streets over with a neighbor. Like literally every day I would see him go back and forth to work. He would drive my house and come back and then leave again.
Wow.
Yeah, that really was intimidating. And the park at the time said I could evict him, but I couldn't evict him from the park. So he had legal rights to be there, which was very upsetting to me because I felt like I had no time to even get away from the situation.
Yeah.
And it felt like I was being stalked. I really did. but I couldn't legally do anything about it. So I had to put up with that for a while.
Mm.
He finally went to go live with a friend. So finally, I think I started to feel a little bit of relief. So he was at this friend's house for, I'd say it was like 3-4 months. And then he actually called me up one day. I think it was, I still had something here of his. I can't remember what it was now, but there was something here of his. Oh, because legally, right. He had 15 days also legally to get his property out. And I had to send him a certified letter in the state of Florida. That's how it works after eviction. So he had some stuff here and I let him come get it. So that's how that started. So we started talking when he was here, when he was getting his stuff. And he had told me how sorry he was about what he did. And he realized, that he made a huge mistake with me and made some what I would call amends at that point and said he wanted to come back. And I was kind of like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if that's a good idea.
Did you think he'd changed since he had been evicted?
I think I felt very much like he really. So the answer to that was somewhat yes, because I think there was a real sense of I really screwed up, and I think he kind of wanted to make it right with me.
So you felt remorse from him.
Yeah,
and
I did.
you bought you bought the remorse. You bought the remorse.
I did.
He had shamed himself and said, you're right. I'm everything you said I am, but I'm a better guy now. Can I move back in?
Well, I don't know that he promised me he was going to be a better guy, but he definitely said, that he was going to, make a commitment to me because that's when I talked about it. I said, look, you can't come back here without a contract. Like there's going to be, and I don't know why I thought this was valid, but I did. I said, you're going to sign a contract of what you're going to pay per month. You're going to work with me, as far as negotiating the bills. And, we're going to sit down every couple of weeks and we're going to talk about what's owed, what needs to be paid. And he was totally agreeable to all of that. I actually made him sign something. I did.
So look, basically a lease, right?
Yeah, yeah, right.
Yeah. And how did it go?
It went okay for a while. He was very steadily giving me money, and when I would ask for extra money as far as food or toiletries, he would give it to me. So it did go good actually for a while. It was steady. He was keeping his word and his obligations. He was working around the house. He was actually putting some things, some money into the house. He wasn't asking to borrow money from me. So it went good. Went good for a year or two.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it went good for a long time. And then he lost his job. And I'm like, all right, well, are you going to get another one right away? Because you're not staying here without a job. Yeah, I've been looking at them, I'm going to make sure I get another one. And I said, okay, because this could be 6 months to a year.
Yeah.
So I said, make sure you're out there and you're really pounding the pavement. You're going to get a job. Oh, I got something else lined up, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, which he did. And he was making more money, supposedly. And then he lost that job. I think it was like not even 2 years later. And again, I'm back at, you need to find another job. You can't stay here if you're not going to find a steady job. Oh, I'm going to get something, we'll get something for sure, it's extermination, I'll have no problem.
And you feel like you're such a banshee, saying, you got to get a job. You got to get a job, like a broken record. And they'll flip that narrative and turn it into an emotional issue. Well, if you wouldn't nag me so much, or if you'd help me find the right job, they'll find a way to make it your responsibility.
And you're right. And he had started actually doing that, saying, because there was a job one time, I wouldn't pay for his phone. So he could call for, job interviews and jobs. because he didn't have any money to pay for his phone. So I gave it to him for a little while and then said, I'm done. I'm not paying you for your phone anymore. You better figure it out. You got to get a job, which he finally did. But these consistent patterns of like, I'd get a job, maybe he'd hold it for a year, and then after that, he'd complain about the job. Next thing I know, I believe he got fired. I was actually away for Christmas, and in my gut, I knew something happened, but I just didn't know what. And he had told me, they picked me up from the airport, that he had lost his job. And I was just so tired. I was so tired, just so tired of, the pressure, the stress, carrying the burden, mentally, I was wore out. And I knew that I knew. I don't know. I knew intuitively, mentally, spiritually, in every way that, I just can't live like this anymore. I can't do it. This constant instability. Yeah, people lose jobs. I get it. But he was using drugs. And I only discovered that because he had brought it into my home a couple times. And I found it.
Well, that explains the money.
That explains the money. So there was that other component going on there too, which added to the situation.
So he was able to hide a drug problem from you, even though he was living with you?
Yep.
Wow. So you tell him he needs to move out again?
Yep. And especially now because of the drug issue. Now I'm like, you gotta go. You gotta go. You can't, it's just it's my house, it's my values. You knew from day one, you can't live here and do that. Part of my story is I'm in recovery, so that's not a healthy environment for me at all. I'm solid in my sobriety, however.
Well, and if he knows that, that's extreme disrespect. He's not just freeloading off you, but for someone to move into your home and then they are, oops, did I forget to tell you I'm a drunk? I mean, I can certainly relate to that.
Yeah, so there was that. So there was more of an urgency for me to get him out due to that reason. And now I know where all the money's going. That's when I decided to evict him again. I said, I can't have you doing this.
So he wasn't simply going to move out. You had to literally go through the legal process once again.
No, again. And I had even went to him and said, this isn't working for me. This is not working for me. It's just not working for me. And I gave him a 30-day notice. I didn't have to. In Florida, all you need is a 3-day notice. So, but I did it. And I gave him time. I said, you have some time to figure this out. And a lot of times he would come walking in the door and I'd be like, did you look for a place? Oh, I did this and I did that. And I'm working here. I'm doing that. I don't really. What do you mean that I have time to look for a place? I said, yeah, I'm telling you, you got to look for a place. No, it's okay. Again, I'm not telling him that I evicted him.
Yeah.
This time the process went quicker. I didn't have to pay money because I filed as an indigent. So it kind of went faster. But yeah, he made no efforts to move or go anywhere.
So he let you go through the process and then what was that final day? Now, this is the last time you're going to evict him.
It was May. I know, because it's been 2 years. So it was 2 years ago, in May. He basically said, and I remember because I had a girlfriend here, same thing, because I did the same thing. And he said, I got 24 hours to stay here. But basically, prior to that, he was like, I got nowhere to go. And I'm like, there's nothing I can do about that. You're going to have to figure it out. But after, prior to leaving here, he got himself arrested. So.
Oh. Was he arrested for domestic violence or for something pertaining to you?
Pertaining to me.
Wow. So once he was gone, did you get an order of protection against him or did he just simply go away?
No, well, what he did was he grabbed my face, which I didn't necessarily think was domestic violence at the time. I know, believe it or not, all that counseling and everything. And I didn't think grabbing my face was, a misdemeanor or assault. And the police officer, see, what happened is he came back here. I had all his stuff before and asked him to take it all. And he came back here later that night and he was knocking at my door and I didn't let him in. And I said, you got to leave. I got 24 hours. I said, you're not staying here 24 hours. Which eventually he came back to get some stuff of his.
And then there was finally the end. He got his stuff. That was the end of the relationship. The last time
I got most
would be
of it. I mean, there was still stuff here that I got rid of long after. He didn't come for it.
And that was your last contact with him?
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think? You know, a lot of people listening now to your story I can relate to a lot of it. I know a lot of men and women who have been through your situation, and it is predominantly a woman who gets put in these freeloader traps with a male partner who can manipulate his way around your basic overhead and just kind of slip themselves underneath it and do it at your expense. Now that you've been through this whole drama and trauma and the chaos of what this person cost you, somebody who's out there who's listening right now, who's under domestic violence and under financial abuse, what would you suggest to them if they're in your situation right now?
Yeah, I really thought about this hard because I needed a lot of support, even though I was still financially independent, because I was. And it's because I was, and I think maybe this does stem back to my past experiences with being a single mother and having to educate myself, put myself out there and support my children no matter what. I always made sure that, my finances, I was paying my bills, I had food, clothing, and shelter, a little bit of extra in the bank, and my credit cards solely in my name where nobody could get access. So, get support, I found that counselors through the Domestic Violence Coalition was really, really, really helpful to me.
Yeah, that's critical, I think, is that you had a voice of sanity, somebody who could push your critical thinking to, just say to you, no, this is not a relationship issue. This is a domestic violence issue that you're in. And as you said, wow, I mean, I was surprised. I mean, that didn't seem like it applied to me. And that's so similar, to everyone else's story who's been through any form of domestic violence is that, you just don't think your situation is that. I'm quick to point it out with someone else, but I can't see it in myself. And I think you've depicted that really well or painted that scenario really well with how your situation was, because this person was able to come back twice, not just once, but twice.
Yeah. And, so definitely, as far as connecting with, friends, family, anybody that's supportive, I had a lot of friends and family who were very, very, had gone through this journey with me and been there for me through it all, because there were a lot of moments I leaned to them for support, especially with the stress. I was very depressed, and they really, really, really helped me a lot get through a lot of that. My recovery program also helped me a lot.
Yeah, for sure. And legal support as well.
Yeah. And then the legal department through the coalition, knowing that they would be there, getting educated on legal resources. It was very, very critical that they were there because when I needed them, I could call the hotline, I could call anytime and talk to somebody. So it was really, really good. I really appreciated them after that. I've actually gone to speak a couple of times, volunteer to speak at a lot of their events. But, I do have some things in mind that I did think about, if at all possible. And sometimes it's not possible. And I know I've gone through it, but what I started doing is I started putting money, and I was saving money. I was actually throwing it in a coffee can, which I thought he didn't know about. And believe it, in the end, he did take it.
Oh,
Yeah, he took it. And I didn't know it. I found out later. So I feel like it wasn't a waste of time to save that money. I did not share my passwords with him, but protect your information. He did ask me one time to use my debit card, and I said no. And he got mad about that because he was just going to go to the store and buy something, quote, needed.
yeah.
And I said no. I refused that. I said nobody touches my debit card. One of the things I did too was I kept a lot of my records out of the house. So I took most of like my important records, my eviction papers, anything like that, and I kept it at a friend's house for a while.
Like birth certificates,
Yeah.
legal documents. That's a really good idea. Also, and I've heard you mention this before, opening a post office box, have your mail delivered there. I know you've mentioned utility companies.
Yeah.
And I guess you can put on a private PIN for your cell phone and your
You can.
utility company so they can't access that information.
Yeah. I never shared my password with him. I never gave it to him.
Yeah, that was smart.
You know,
Yeah.
again,
Because it's easy for them to ask those questions. You know, hey, what's your PIN? I need to go to the ATM. We'll get that for you.
right.
And it's real easy, you know, for them to get that information. Also, if you have a house alarm, you know, they
Right.
always have a house alarm code. And, you know, you got to think to change these things. And actually, that kind of leads me to my last question to you is what is your tip for someone who's now out of the situation like you are? You're out now, but maybe they're newly out and they are now trying to start recovering from this.
There's a lot of healing I had to do for myself. You know, I really had to take a hard look at myself, look at all that trauma, and look at the fact that I was an abuse survivor, period.
Mm-hmm.
Again, definitely, you know, if you feel like you need to get, you know, a good therapist, they're out there, you know, get one. As a support, you know, be patient. I think, you know, I extended myself a lot of grace, really. And I say that because I think we don't.
Oh, it's easy to blame yourself. I mean, I can absolutely relate to that. Like, what a moron I was to let this guy in my house. But, you know, we do these mental gymnastics with ourselves, with relationships. And, you know, we can do it for years. And then you stop doing those mental gymnastics and realize, wow, I've been doing cartwheels to make this relationship look like something it's not. And you can feel stupid for having done that.
I felt stupid for a long time. I still do sometimes. And then it's not as bad as it used to be, you know, but for a long time, I walked around with the shame with that a long time. And
well, and you've said as well, you're traumatized by not just emotionally, but you've been traumatized financially too.
Yeah. And one of the things I definitely did, and I can tell you this, is that because I was so exhausted. I didn't know how exhausted I was. I just didn't even realize how exhausted I was. And that's why I say be grateful and patient with yourself. You know, it took me a long time. And one of the things I had to do was be okay with not doing anything and just getting rest because I was just so emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and physically just exhausted. I slept for days after that. I mean, I couldn't literally, I just physically could not like move. And it took me weeks before I finally got the energy up to feel like, okay, you know, I'm back to being me again. I mean, that's how much stress I had been under, my body was under, and really learning how to like listen to my body and pay attention to that and be okay with, all right, it's physically going to take me time as well as mentally. And financially, I don't think, you know, I started to focus on the, financial stuff kind of a little bit later because I was too exhausted and too burned out mentally to even deal with it. So, by the time I got around to the financial piece of it and I looked at everything and where I was, I just basically, I started going over everything, my budget and what I think is, again, it's just extending grace and patience because what I saw when I saw it was very depressing. And I really had to get through that. Like, oh my God, like, this is what I did over here. And this is how much money I lent him over here. Because what I was doing was ruminating about all the money, wasted, where it had gone. Oh my God, he owes me $4,000 over here. Oh my God. It was so overwhelming. I did not recover financially from this overnight. It didn't happen. And here's the interesting part about this is I do share this stuff. My own child, my own daughter is, going through something in her life. But she is now starting to understand the dynamic of financial abuse in her own life. And her ability to talk to me it makes me really emotional. It makes me really cry because I feel like, for mother and daughter to kind of, have a, heart language around all that. Out of a tragic situation, it's been a blessing.
That's amazing that you can take your wisdom from that situation and now you can pass it on to your own daughter who can now see the warning flags that you hadn't seen and that you can bring that wisdom to the next generation. Terry, I can't thank you enough for being on the show today and telling us your story. And anyone listening out there, if you have a financial abuse story to tell and you'd like to come on the show anonymously, we'd love to have you. Just contact us through our website, www.financialabusehelp.net, and tell your story as well. Terry, thank you again, and we hope to see you all soon.